Hi, I am Jonny John. To create greater happiness in life, we have to address the suffering state of mind. So today we're looking at what suffering is, so we know what we're dealing with. So what is suffering? Suffering is simply any negative state of mind which creates unhappiness from within. For instance, fear, anger, impatience, and the list goes on. And it does not matter whether it's big or small. Because if we only focus on the big ones, we're going to surely forget to address the smaller ones. And the smaller ones may be magnified by an outer experience later on, such as our fear of public speaking. We may not really feel it now in our daily lives until we're put in front of an audience. So suffering, whether big or small, is equally important to be addressed. And it's really important also to be aware that suffering is a state of mind rather than an action. So you may not appear angry, but if you're experiencing anger even slightly, then you're angry. It's simple as that. It's important to develop this awareness because we can only address what we're aware of. Now that we know what suffering is, let us look at the cause of suffering. There's the outer cause and there's the inner cause. Let us use an example. For instance, our work colleague said something to make us angry. What is the outer cause? It is our work colleague. And how do we address the outer cause? Well, there are various ways. You can address it by arguing with him. You can address it by avoiding him or suppressing the anger. I'm not here to talk about the right way of addressing the outer cause because that's completely up to you. I'm here to say, if we do not address the inner cause, no matter if you win the argument with him or if you successfully avoid this person for the rest of your life, you will still experience suffering state of the mind again and again when a similar situation arises. So that's why it's important to know what the inner cause of suffering is so we can address it. So what's the inner cause? Well, personally, when I started out on my journey of addressing the suffering state of the mind, I did not know the inner cause. And as a result, I created very little self-transformation. In the beginning, I just couldn't, no one told me what the inner cause was. I actually tried to look for it in books and the internet, but everyone was talking about how to manage it at the surface level. After a while, I realized it's really important to know how suffering begins at the deepest level so we can address it there. And because by doing that, we don't have to experience it again. So I went on my own journey of researching how suffering was created. And to do my research, I would wake up every day at 4 a.m., prepare myself for meditation and yoga to stabilize my mind because I would then put myself in suffering situations day by day so I can experience what this experience of suffering really is in the mind. For instance, if I wanted to study the fear of heights, I would go ride a roller coaster, I would climb a tree, I flew a stunt plane, I went bungee jumping, and all sorts, just to bring the fear out. If I wanted to study anger, then I would surround myself with people I didn't like. To study impatience, I went on really long, horrible meditation retreats that just seemed to last forever, and that really brought the impatience out of me. And I simply observed and observed. It was quite a stimulating and horrible experience, but of course meditation really helped to stabilize my mind through the experience so I can simply observe what was happening. And what I discovered was that all forms of sufferings, whether it's fear, anger, or impatience, when you're in a state of suffering, you're in a state of rejection towards yourself, towards a situation, or a person outside. I call this state of suffering a state of rejection of the self, because to the deeper mind, the self is everything that exists in the world. And what creates this state of rejection? It comes from the negative ideas we create in our minds. And what are negative ideas? They are ideas which promote the rejection of the self, and they can be easily understood as self-declarations which begin with "it is not okay." For instance, it is not okay to fail. It is not okay to be embarrassed. It's not okay to be rude. It is not okay to waste time, and all sorts. And from this negative idea comes suffering. So from the negative idea comes suffering from all levels of the mind, because it's not okay, for instance, to fail. Then there will be a state of rejection towards the self when it fails. There will be the negative physical sensations to do with failing. There will be negative thoughts about failing because it's not okay to fail. There will be fears of failing because it's not okay to fail. There will be negative judgment towards each other for failing. So from one negative idea, so that one negative idea is experienced in all levels of the self, and that comprises the suffering experience. Now I know it's really hard to understand this at the intellectual level, and I've greatly simplified it. You can look at it in more detail on my website, creationwithincreation.com. But what you can do with this information, I guess, is from now on, when you go through a suffering experience, try to describe it through negative ideas. For instance, a work colleague said something angry to you. Ask yourself, perhaps a work colleague has something to make you angry. Then you can ask yourself, what negative ideas are driving my suffering experience? And often you will find many negative ideas. But most often you will not know what negative ideas I apply. Because when we are suffering, we're in a state of confusion as well. The mind will be stimulated with all sorts of thoughts about how to punish the other person, how to escape the situation, how to solve the outer course rather than the inner course. That is why it's important to develop stillness, because this will help us to be in a state of observation rather than reaction, so we can know the negative ideas within our suffering experiences. So in summary, today we've learned what suffering is. We've learned that suffering is any negative state of mind which creates unhappiness from within, whether it's big or small, equally important to be addressed. We've understood the outer course of suffering. The outer course can be understood as the experiences we go through, which brings out the inner course of suffering into light, the negative ideas. In the next video, we'll be talking about how to transform our sufferings so that we do not have to experience them again. So I'll see you in the next video.